Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for downloading Sound Bites on Wisp Sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen, and this is Season 2, Episode 2. I'm Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen, a chiropractor and functional medicine practitioner in Oregon. Today's show is going to be all about the gut microbiome and the impacts that bacteria in your gut can have not only on your health, but also on your performance.
Summer is here. You don't want to miss that majestic summer sunset, perfect wave, or family picnic because you're stuck at home with ear pain. You can make a splash at that next beach party with Highland's homeopathic earache drops and tablets for natural relief or minor fever, ear pain, and throbbing associated with earaches. After you've been diagnosed by a physician, try Highland's homeopathic earache drops or tablets. Highland's has been trusted by generations to provide safe homeopathic medicines for everyone in your family. Earache drops are available at Walgreens. To learn more, go to highlands.com/ear. That's HYLANDS, highlands.com/ear. Claims are based on traditional homeopathic practice, not accepted medical evidence, not FDA evaluated. Always read and follow label directions.
Let's dive in. First, where we're going to start is what is gut health and what is the microbiome? So gut health has a lot to do with the bacteria in your gut. So that's what we actually call the microbiome. It's a bunch of different types of bacteria that are living in your gut that help you do so many different things with not only just health, but digestion. You also have bacteria in your mouth. You have it on your skin. The microbiome as a whole of like the human body, bacteria are playing a lot of different roles in how we have just overall health. So when we're talking about the gut, we've really got to hone in on how our bacteria are functioning, what types of diversity we have, and ultimately looking at, what types of benefits are they going to have, not only for our health, but for performance. So why do we need healthy bacteria? And then what does also a healthy microbiome look like? So healthy bacteria is something that you can have good bacteria that we would call good bacteria, and you can have bad bacteria. So we kind of start to talk about this called dysbiosis. With healthy bacteria and really good bacteria, it means that it's working for our good. With bad bacteria, oftentimes what's happening is either we can see certain chronic conditions or diseases or issues with the GI tract, an increase in inflammation. You can see a lot of different things start to happen that really have an impact on our overall body's health if we have a large amount of bad bacteria in our gut. So a healthy microbiome not only looks diverse, but it also has a lot of different types of components that help to feed and keep the good bacteria where we want them. Because you got to remember, bacteria just are they're living things, right? So you want to make sure that you also have food for them to stay. So oftentimes our diet and our nutrition can feed our bacteria one way or another. So if you're eating a lot of highly processed foods, refined carbohydrates and sugars, most likely you're going to be feeding the bad bacteria in the GI tract, versus if you eat a lot of really healthy fibers, colorful foods, things that are, healthy proteins and vegetables and fruits and really healthy fats, you're going to be giving a lot of the healthy bacteria the food that they need in order to stay, and then they will. So that's kind of how we start to look at bacteria in the gut. Some of the problems that can happen with the gut, especially when we're talking about health of the GI tract, are things like an overgrowth in bacteria. So as I mentioned already, dysbiosis, when we have an overgrowth of certain bacteria that we really don't want to be there. There's also Most of the time when we're talking about bacteria, we're talking about the large intestine, which is where the majority of your microbiome in the gut lives. The small intestine, which comes before the large intestine, right after the stomach, is not super sterile. It does have some bacteria, but it's not designed to have a lot of bacteria. But when we do see a lot of bacteria there, we'll often see a lot of bloating, leading to the possibility of SIBO. So small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is a much more common thing to be talking about now. But we really want to see most of our bacteria be in the large intestine. Some other issues that can come from the gut would be things like pain, would be things like autoimmune disease, so looking at Crohn's, celiac, ulcerative colitis. I'm seeing a little bit more of an uptick and increase in autoimmune disease in the athlete kind of world. And so I want to talk a bit today about how we're seeing in research that there are some connections between leaky gut and intestinal permeability happening in the GI tract with autoimmune disease. So just briefly touching on that, intestinal permeability or leaky gut is essentially when inflammation of the GI tract lining has created a little bit of gapping in between the cells that line the gut that are designed to be very tight, because you don't want things like pathogens and undigested food particles getting into your bloodstream for many reasons. But you actually have about 60 to 70% of your immune system is at the lining of your GI tract, because we do get a lot of things into our digestive system like pathogens and stuff like that that are the outside world. We don't want those getting in, we need some protection against that. So with intestinal permeability, what happens is the cells that make up the lining of your gut can start to get a little bit loosey-goosey. And then they can start to let things like food particles, pathogens, other things that we really don't want getting into the bloodstream, they start to let that happen. So then what happens is your immune system is constantly launching an immune response to what it's getting in from your GI tract, which then starts to lead to more inflammation. That's when we can start to see what we call systemic inflammation with things like achy joints all over the body. We can even see things like chronic fatigue. We can see brain fog, and so issues with cognition a bit. We're just starting to see the impacts that the GI tract and basically the health of the GI tract can have on the rest of the body. So I think it's really important that when we're talking about the gut, we really make sure that we have everything nice and as anti-inflammatory as possible, and everything's just working really nicely, because it can have a significant impact on the rest of the body. But it can also, if you have a really healthy gut, there's a lot of things that it can do for your athletic performance. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about a couple of different research articles that have explored this a bit. And remember too that we've been exploring, in research anyway, we've been exploring the GI tract and its impact on things like type 2 diabetes, on chronic illness. But the best part about that is that we're starting to learn how the GI tract and the bacteria actually can influence our metabolic system. So our metabolism, talking about things like processing glucose, things that are real, and protein, things that are really important to athletes, right? Like how we use fuel. So we're basically going to be able to apply some of these things that we're learning for chronic illnesses, and we're starting to see how they might actually have an impact also on athletic performance. So here's one that I thought was super interesting. There was a rapid gut microbiome change in an ultramarathon runner. It was a small study, but the study basically examined changes in the GI microbiome of a world-class ultramarathon runner before and after competing in the Western States Endurance Run, which was about, for those of you who don't know, it's about 163 kilometers mountain foot race. It's quite a big one, and it's well known. As far as in the ultra world. But 2 hours post-race, what was so interesting is that there were considerable changes in that runner's gut microbiome. There were a lot of different bacteria that changed, including the Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes ratio, which, just to let you know, that particular ratio in this athlete rose from 4.4 to 14.2, in meaning that it greatly increased the amount of bacteria that were in the gut. which is super interesting. Also, if there's a imbalance between that Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes ratio, sometimes this can be linked to why some patients become overweight and they really can't lose the weight. They can't figure out why they can't get that down. Sometimes that can lead back to the type of bacteria that are in your gut, and those two, and that ratio in particular, is sometimes implicated in that. So something just to keep in mind if that's something that you're looking into. But isn't that interesting that in a runner, just during an ultra marathon race, there was significant changes in the gut just with the impact of performance and just being in a race. So I really think that there's a lot more going on with our gut than we're really even understanding at this point. But a lot of gut studies have started to look at how do things like exercise, how do things like diet and supplements and environment, and how do things like antibiotics and medications and genetics and epigenetics, how do those all play in with what's happening with our gut? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit in the context of what working on the gut microbiome might have as far as an impact on personalized sports nutrition and what that might look like. So some of the things that they're starting to look into, and I already mentioned that Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes ratio, there were some contrasting results with the effects of the possibility that the microbiome might have on VO2 max, testing out that system. And so some research articles found that there was actually an impact that the microbiome did have on VO2 max results, but there were some others that kind of disagreed and didn't really see as much of a benefit there. And I think it's important that we talk about that, when we're studying a lot of these types of things, we do get research that says, yes, we saw a great thing and we saw an impact, and then we see others that say, nah, I'm not really sure. So it's important when we talk about this that we talk about both sides of the picture, so that we kind of know what to look for. But it is possible that the bacteria may have an impact on our VO2 max testing and our capacity, really. The other thing, too, that I thought was interesting is that you really, our gut microbiome, I think where most of the benefits come from is really its solid impact on nutrition and absorption. And of course, when we're thinking about athletes and thinking about fueling, I think we typically are thinking about nutrition when we're thinking about our proteins, we're thinking about our carbohydrates, we're thinking about healthy fats, and then you also see a lot of types of supplements with caffeine, right? And we see many different things like that in our sports supplements. But really, when you want to make sure that you're really using those nutrients well, there's quite a bit going on in the gut that helps you to do that. Also, keeping in mind that antioxidants are, and I'll link this back, I promise, but antioxidants have a huge impact on how your body deals with any types of toxins, any type of oxidative stress. So, if you're working out a lot and you're getting kind of sore muscles and your body's not really recovering very well, or if you want to optimize that system and make sure that the stress on your muscles and the inflammation that's formed just from working out, antioxidants can have a very big impact on that. Also, they're really important for your liver for detoxifying and getting most of the daily chemicals that you're exposed to out of your system. Not only that, but also used up hormones, which is also really important too. But your gut microbiome has a super big impact on how the body actually mobilizes and uses antioxidant capacity, and how it absorbs them from your food. You're going to get lots of antioxidants from things like really super colorful foods, like blueberries, like leafy greens, bananas, peppers. Lots of different types of foods have colorful foods are very high in antioxidants, which is why you'll hear me always say, I want you to eat the rainbow, because you're going to get a lot of that from there. And it will have a significant impact on how your body is doing when it's exposed to any type of stress, whether it's coming from your outside life, whether it came from a chemical, or whether it came from just some type of exercise. So again, when we're really looking at how the microbiome might be playing such a big role in health, in athlete performance, we're really looking at, how does the gut make a lot of the things that we take as far as dietary supplements and food and caffeine? How does it make those bioavailable? In other words, how does it make it useful for you? And the gut tends to have a pretty big impact on making sure that the nutrition and the fueling that you use is there and it's ready for you to take advantage of and for the body to mobilize and use. So just keeping in mind that if your gut microbiome has any type of deficiencies or any dysbiosis or issues, that even if you don't have symptoms, I find that there's a handful of patients every once in a while that don't have any symptoms, but they actually, once we run the microbiome lab, they do find that we do find that their gut has some things that we can work on. So, if you want to make sure that your gut is healthy, you can run certain labs to see what's going on, and then make sure that your body is actually using the things that you're putting in to try to, get yourself performing it as best as possible. So the other thing too, that I really want to make sure that as we talk about research as far as the GI tract, the one most important thing to remember is that no matter what, when you're studying the gut in particular, it's going to be difficult because there's a huge amount of inter-individual variability, meaning you listener, you are super unique. You are one of a kind. And so your microbiome is going to be different from the next person and the next. And so when we're studying different types of things going on with the GI tract, there are so many different things that can have an impact on the microbiome that it can cause some difficulty when we're trying to study these things. But I want you to remember that this is also why I really recommend testing and making sure that you specifically have what you need, because as I said, we're all different. Now, some other things that are really awesome about some of the research that we've looked at on the GI tract, we're starting to see things like possible connections between what we call the gut muscle axis and the impact that the GI tract can have on muscle health and overall health. Like definitely remembering that things like short chain fatty acid production come from the GI tract. Those are basically food for the bacteria in the gut, and there's different things that you can be doing to make sure that the environment of your GI tract is healthy. Remember to keep those good bacteria around. So and the impact that can then have on muscle protein synthesis, i.e. building healthy muscle tissue, super important there. Again, talking about antioxidant enzyme activity, so making sure that we're actually breaking down antioxidants from our foods and then being able to absorb them, mobilize them, and use them. Super important there. Also looking at glycogen formation. So keeping in mind that, when we are looking at fueling, we're looking at how do you use glucose? How do you use fat? How do you mobilize and use protein? The glucose and glycogen formation are really important. And one of the things that they actually found in research on obese and diabetic populations was that probiotics and prebiotics were super effective for treating glycogen formation. So when we apply that to athletes, it's just remembering that the bacteria in your GI tract can really help with mobilizing glucose and also using that as a fuel. So something to remember there. Not only that, but it can also, working on the GI tract and keeping inflammation down is another really big aspect of a healthy gut. So inflammation is a very, very wide term that I know gets overused sometimes, but it is important to remember that there's just so much of your GI tract or so much of your immune system at the level of your gut. And that can, if there's anything kind of going on there, then that can cause inflammation either at the level of the gut or into the rest of your body. So what kind of testing can we do to see if we have a healthy gut? And these tests are becoming more and more diverse. There's a lot of different testing now than there used to be. And there's a lot of different labs that are doing different things, and it's getting better. As we see the progression of technology and as we see the progression of research, we're starting to see better and better testing. One of the benefits, I think, of this test is that you actually can do it from home. So I'll send my patients home with a kit, or you guys sometimes can order them online. Just make sure that if you do that, you know that you're getting it from a good lab. But you can run these tests at home and you'll get a full printout of what types of bacteria are in your gut, what the different levels are, and also what kind of environment is your gut bacteria living in. So again, going back to what I talked about before with like the short chain fatty acids, and is there presence of inflammation, stuff like that. So you can also see too, if your immune system is just activated, looking at things like SIGA. You can look at, which is just an immunoglobulin that they test for inflammation in general. But you can see if there's presence of that, and know if you have some things you need to do in order to work on your immune system and get it a little bit into healthier range. But just so you know, when we look at those types of tests, even if we see really good bacteria, you will see good bacteria, what we consider good bacteria in the gut. But if it's out of range, so if you see a lot of highs and a lot of lows, what I like to do is try to make sure that we get that good bacteria back into balance. So, you can have a high presence of certain bacteria that are considered good, but if it's out of range, we really want to make sure that we bring everything nice and into what I call the green area, or the center space where everything's in balance. So there's some things that you can do on a daily basis to help improve your gut bacteria, which is, I think, always the most fun out of listening to anything, is what can I do for myself, right? So one thing that actually is very interesting, and you can find this research article down in the show notes, but over-the-counter probiotics are somewhat controversial. Over-the-counter probiotics, in most cases, especially when we've looked at them through a bunch of different research articles, is that they're most likely a waste. Really what they've found is that over-the-counter probiotics kind of just make their way through the system. They don't stick around. They don't repopulate your gut. They may, lower inflammation a bit as they head through, but for the most part, they're not going to be doing like what you think they're going to be doing. And I think that when a lot of patients go to their doctors asking what they should do about their, irritable bowel syndrome, or their irritable bowel disease, or they are constipated all the time, or they're just not, doing as well with their gut as they want, they're told to just go on probiotics. But really, the research has found that if you can get probiotics from food, it's going to be better. And then there's some research that has started to look at things like spore-based probiotics, some things that you might be able to get from a physician that are not over the counter anyway, and they're a little bit more powerful, and then they might have a better impact than ones that you usually would get like at your grocery store. Foods where you can find a lot of probiotics are foods like yogurt, foods like sauerkraut, and fermented foods. They stick around in your gut a lot longer, and they have been shown to potentially keep some of the better bacteria around in your gut. Also making sure we eat things like prebiotics. So you've heard probiotics, which is bacteria. Prebiotics are the things that are in foods. They're like fibers that promote a healthy gut. They're foods that feed good bacteria. So looking at things like Jerusalem artichokes, looking at eating a wide variety of different colorful plants. So every single plant that's a different color has different types of fibers. So I usually like to say, even if you've cut up one bell pepper and it's going into your meals, maybe you make a scramble in the morning and you've got just even a small amount of spinach, a small amount of bell pepper, some onions. Maybe you also have, on the side, an avocado, like half of an avocado. And maybe later in the morning, you're eating something like some fruit, like strawberries and blueberries. That's, I don't know how many foods I just listed off there, but that's like 5 or 6 different colorful plants and colorful foods. And even if they're just a small amount, they, maybe not like a half a cup or a cup, but just a small portion, like a tablespoon or a little more than that, it's still different types of fibers that are going to have an impact on the bacteria in your gut. So I think that's what's really important to remember, is that it really is the food that you eat that can have a fairly significant impact on keeping a lot of your good bacteria in your gut, and a healthy one too. Obviously, things to avoid would be things like your refined carbs, your your alcohol is one of the ones that can be a little bit tricky there. Also avoiding things like very refined fats. So, your vegetable oils, peanut oils, fried foods, those are not going to support really good bacteria in your gut. Also, something that's really interesting is playing in the soil, going out and gardening and spending time. Even there's some research that's looking at kiddos that grew up on farms. And what they found is that there's a possibility that their bacteria in their gut is a little bit more diverse because they were around different types of animals with different types of bacteria. Usually they don't wash their hands as much because kiddos are outside playing all the time. And just being in the soil and around different types of bacteria can actually help to colonize not only the bacteria on your skin, but also potentially in your gut. And I think that's important because we're living in a world right now that's sanitizing everything. We're removing bacteria from every single surface, and we're for good reason. I know that there's some things going on in the world right now that are scary, and we want to make sure that we stay safe and healthy. But we also have to remember that there are a lot of different benefits that bacteria have for our body, and it is part of our immune system, having really good healthy bacteria, but also being exposed to bacteria too. So going out, gardening, having soil, on your skin, and maybe just not, I definitely recommend do wash your hands, of course, but maybe you don't need to totally scrub them. I think it's okay. And sometimes too, what I'll do is if I bring in carrots from the garden, I'll chop off the tops and just wash them down. And if I'm going to throw them in a stew, I'll make sure that they're not, super dirty and soily and got some sand or coarse rocks on them, but they're clean. But I'll leave the skins on them and I'll just chop them up and throw them in a soup or a stew, and you will get some of the benefits from that too. So there's some options there. And then if you do have something like you're looking for supplements that you would like to look into this a little bit more, just talking with a physician that has access to different types of probiotics and supplements that have a lot of third-party testing on their effectiveness, I think is important. As I kind of mentioned before, there's different types of probiotics that are beneficial, and they're showing more promising research. And one of the things I mentioned was spore-based probiotics. But again, with a lot of supplements, it's just really important that you know that you're getting them. I love to say quality over quantity. It's just, it's the wellness world. They are, trying to make some money off of these things. And so I think it's important that we make sure we go for quality. And because it will have a difference, it will have an impact on your performance, and your health really matters when it comes to that. So just making sure that you're getting really good products that you're putting in your body is really, really important. So that is our episode for now. You can find all of those research articles that I mentioned today and a few more in the show notes below. So make sure you check those out if you want to learn more. You'll also be able to, and you'll see those references on wispsports.com. Please make sure to follow Wisp Sports on all social media channels. And please make sure to share this episode with anyone you think may love it and may find this super helpful. You can also follow me, Dr. K, at Dr. Kirstin. That's DrKirstin on Facebook and Instagram. You can also find me at drkirstin.com. If you'd like to reach us with any comments or questions about this episode, you can reach us at info@wispsports.com. And you can always leave a direct message with us over on social media as well. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode, where we are going to talk all about how you can leverage changes in your nutrition with your cycle and hormones for best fueling health and performance. Thanks for listening.